I knew the exact moment CoreTech Industries was about to learn what real consequences looked like. It wasn't when the quarterly numbers dipped or when they replaced the decent coffee with organic mud that tasted like disappointment. It was the moment Christopher Reid walked into our conference room. The name's Will Harper, by the way, 49 years old, been slinging code for this Denver outfit for 8 years now. Before that, I spent 12 years in the Navy keeping computer systems running on destroyers. These days, I keep CoreTech's logistics platform from catching fire when Black Friday hits. Christopher was our new CTO, a 28-year-old MBA experiment who smelled like expensive cologne and unearned confidence. He strutted into that conference room like he was about to part the Red Sea, except the Red Sea was just a bunch of tired engineers hoping for decent severance packages. I was sitting in the corner with my coffee, watching him survey the room. In tech years, 8 years at one company makes you a fossil. I'm the guy who knows why the servers don't melt down when 50,000 orders hit simultaneously. But to Christopher, I was just some old-timer in a flannel shirt who looked like he needed a nap. "Listen up, team," Christopher started, clapping his hands together. "I've been reviewing our architecture, and honestly, it's a mess. Legacy garbage holding us back. We're pivoting to a microservices-first, AI-driven ecosystem by Q3. He threw up a slide that looked like a football play drawn by a hyperactive kid. I squinted at it. This genius was proposing to gut the central logic core of our entire logistics platform. That legacy garbage he was talking about, that was Flowmaster. My baby. The code I wrote during the 2020 supply chain nightmare that literally saved this company from bankruptcy. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was rusty, hadn't spoken up in a meeting for months. Heads turned. That garbage handles 90% of our vendor compliance. You delete that and you're not just pivoting, you're lobotomizing the company. Christopher turned to me with that practiced smile, the kind you perfect listening to TED Talks about disruption. He looked at my gray beard, my CoreTech polo that had seen better days, then checked his Apple Watch. "And you are?" he asked, like he didn't know exactly who I was. "Will Harper," I said, keeping it simple. "I built the backbone you're trying to surgically remove." Christopher chuckled. It was a wet, condescending sound. "Right, Will. Look, old-timer, I appreciate what you did back in the day, but we're not running a history museum. We're building the future. Your monolithic code is holding us hostage. We need agility. We need velocity." The words old-timer hung in the air like a bad smell. The other engineers stared at their laptops, terrified. They knew something Christopher didn't. They knew I wasn't technically an employee. But Christopher was too busy admiring his reflection in the whiteboard to do his homework. See, back in 2018, when CoreTech was a chaotic startup with more lawsuits than revenue, they couldn't afford my rate. I was a freelance systems architect charging enough to make CFOs weep. So my lawyer, Brian Rodriguez, a shark who operates out of a strip mall but knows contracts better than anyone, came up with a different arrangement. I didn't sign an employment contract. I signed a licensing agreement. I incorporated Fortress Logic LLC and licensed the Flowmaster platform to CoreTech. Think of it like Microsoft Office. You don't buy the software, you rent the right to use it. And like any landlord, I kept the keys. Christopher didn't know that. He saw a graying ex-Navy guy with tired eyes and figured I was dead weight from a bygone era. He thought he was firing a rusty cog. He didn't realize he was trying to evict the landlord while still living in the house. "Okay, Christopher," I said, leaning back. The plastic chair creaked. "You're the boss. Agility, velocity. Got it," he smirked, turning back to his meaningless diagram. "We're going to start sunsetting the old modules immediately. HR will be doing some restructuring to align with our new vision. Restructuring, corporate speak for firing people who actually know how things work." I didn't argue. I didn't throw my coffee at him, though the urge was strong. I just sat there watching him pontificate about synergies and bandwidth optimization. When you've been in the trenches this long, you don't panic when the rookie pulls the pin on the grenade. You just check your watch and calculate the blast radius. I looked at my phone. The quarterly licensing payment was due in 4 days. Paragraph 4 of my contract was very specific about what happens when they try to modify or disparage the integrity of the software. And paragraph 6? That was the nuclear option. Christopher wrapped up with a "let's crush it" team and strutted out, probably to drink a kale smoothie and congratulate himself. I stayed seated, finishing my cold coffee. Kevin Morrison, one of the junior devs I'd trained not to delete production databases, looked at me with wide eyes. "Will," he whispered, "are you okay? He's going to cut you." I crushed the styrofoam cup and tossed it in the recycling bin. "Don't worry about me, Kevin. Just do yourself a favor. If you see me walking out with a box later this week, don't help me carry it. Update your resume instead." The freeze-out started immediately. First, the calendar invites stopped coming. Weekly architecture syncs? Gone. Strategy meetings? Not invited. I watched through the glass-walled conference room as Christopher held court, erasing my flowcharts and replacing them with buzzwords like holistic synergy and cloud-native mindset. It's funny how fast you become invisible. 8 years of 80-hour weeks, 8 years of 3 a.m. emergency patches so the CEO could afford his boat collection. Suddenly I was a ghost. People I'd grabbed beers with started avoiding eye contact. In corporate America, getting fired is contagious. Then came Matthew Turner, the product evangelist. Christopher introduced him Tuesday morning. Kid looked 12, wearing sneakers that had never touched a server room floor. He wandered over to my desk with a matcha latte, looking like a puppy who just peed on the rug but thinks he's a good boy. "Hey, Will, right?" Matthew beamed. "Christopher told me you're our legacy historian. I'd love to pick your brain about the old code before we deprecate it." Historian. Deprecate. I turned my chair slowly. "Matthew, do you know what a load balancer is?" He blinked. "Well, conceptually, we use AWS for that, right? It's all serverless now." "Serverless," I repeated. "Right. Because the cloud is magic pixie dust, not actual hardware melting in a Virginia warehouse if you don't optimize your queries." He wandered off looking confused. I almost felt bad. Almost. He was walking into a minefield with a map drawn by a narcissist. By Thursday, my staging environment access was revoked. Generic system email. Permissions updated by admin CR. I didn't fight it. I didn't storm into Christopher's office demanding answers. I opened my personal laptop, my trusty Lenovo that held the real keys, and checked the Fortress Logic bank account. It was the first of the month. Usually Mark Patterson, the old CFO who understood contracts, had the quarterly payment on autopay. But Mark got restructured last month too. I refreshed the page. No pending transaction. I sat there, blue monitor light reflecting in my reading glasses, feeling oddly calm. They were ghosting the payment. In their arrogance, they assumed since I collected a salary, actually a retainer fee disguised as payroll, they owned everything. I pulled up the contract. Digital copy, but the original signed in wet ink was safe in my fireproof box at home. Clause 3.1, Payment Obligations. Failure to remit licensing fees within 24 hours constitutes material breach. Clause 3.2, No cure period for willful non-payment or unauthorized modification. Christopher had already violated the modification clause trying to bolt his microservices onto my core without API keys. Now he was about to violate payment. I could have warned him, could have said, "Hey hotshot, you're about to default on the software that runs your inventory system." But then I remembered old timer. I remembered how he laughed calling my work legacy garbage, so I let the clock tick. Friday 4 p.m., HR sent a calendar invite. Subject, quick sync. Location, meeting room B, classic Friday firing. Due at end of day so the victim can't cause a scene. Staff has the weekend to forget they existed. I packed light. Few photos, my lucky screwdriver set, a half-dead cactus that somehow survived the office air quality. I wiped my company laptop with military-grade software. Not hiding anything, just professional courtesy. Don't leave fingerprints. I checked the account one last time. Still zero. I grabbed my manila folder from home and headed to the principal's office. Meeting room B was a glass fishbowl, designed so everyone could watch your execution. Christopher leaned against the wall, arms crossed, posing for an imaginary Forbes cover. Michelle Thompson from HR sat at the table looking like she wanted to be anywhere else, possibly dead. "Have a seat, Will," Michelle said softly, her voice like she was talking to a spooked horse. I sat and placed my folder on the table. Christopher eyed it suspiciously, probably thinking it was desperate project charts to save my job. "Will," Christopher started, not letting Michelle do her job. "We've been evaluating team structure, and your skill set doesn't align with CoreTech's trajectory." Trajectory, I nodded slowly. Like a missile into a mountain. His jaw tightened. We're terminating your employment. Effective immediately. Standard severance, 2 weeks' pay. We'll need your badge and laptop. Michelle slid papers across the table. We also need you to sign this NDA and non-disparagement agreement to receive severance. I didn't touch the papers. Just to be clear, you're terminating our professional relationship completely? That's what fired means, old-timer, Christopher snapped. The mask was slipping. He wanted me out, wanted my salary budget to hire 3 more Matthews. Okay. I pulled out my badge, slid it across the table, placed the laptop beside it. I'm no longer an employee. Good, Christopher said, pushing off the wall. Security will escort you out. Wait, I put my hand on the manila folder. We're done with employment. Now we discuss the vendor relationship. Christopher frowned. What are you talking about? I opened the folder. Inside was the licensing agreement for Flowmaster, signed 2018, auto-renewed quarterly. I spun it so they could read it. I don't work for you, Christopher. Never really did. Fortress Logic licenses the technology running your procurement, logistics, and vendor payments. I was just on-site support included in the premium tier. Christopher laughed. Actually laughed. He picked up the contract, glanced at the cover page, tossed it back. This is old paperwork from startup days. We own everything you wrote. Intellectual property assignment, standard stuff. Actually, I said, tapping paragraph 4. Read it. All code, architecture, and algorithms remain sole property of Fortress Logic. CoreTech gets non-exclusive, revocable usage rights, contingent on timely payment and usage guidelines. I watched his eyes scan the paragraph, saw the moment it hit his brain but refused to process. Too absurd for his worldview. In his world, developers were cogs. Companies owned everything. This is, he sputtered, you were on payroll. That voids this. Check with legal, I said. I was on retainer, taxed as 1099 for first 2 years, then W-2 for administrative convenience per specific addendum signed by the founder. But IP rights never transferred. Fortress Logic still holds copyright registration. I stood up. Here's the situation, Christopher. You just fired on-site support. That's fine. I was tired of the coffee. Anyway, but you also missed quarterly licensing payment. That's breach of contract. I'm not paying you a dime, Christopher hissed, face turning red that clashed with his vest. Get out before I call the cops. Okay. I walked to the door, paused, looked back at Michelle. Michelle, you might want to print hard copies of payroll data. Friendly tip. I looked at Christopher one last time. Clause 6, hotshot. Look it up. Unauthorized use following breach results in immediate service suspension. You have 72 hours to cure the breach. But since you fired the only guy who knows how to keep the engine running, I'd say you have less than that. Get out, he yelled. I walked out past my old desk, past Kevin aggressively typing nothing, past the break room into the Denver afternoon. Lit my first cigarette in 6 months. Tasted like freedom. Back home in my 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like coffee and soldering iron, I set up my command center. Wasn't going to hack them, that's illegal. This was administrative enforcement of a binding contract. I logged into Fortress Logic's remote admin panel. It communicated with CoreTech servers via a heartbeat signal. Every hour their server pinged mine asking, "Am I still allowed to exist?" And for 8 years my server replied, "Yes, carry on. I poured bourbon, Maker's Mark, not the cheap stuff. Check the license status. Current, grace period. Grace period ends, minus 48 hours." Christopher had called my bluff. He thought the contract was a prop, thought I was just a bitter old man waving paper around. He didn't understand that the code I wrote was paranoid. I wrote it that way because I knew people like him existed. The software verified its license against my blockchain registry. Immutable. I changed settings from grace period to strict enforcement, then queued up revoke license key 001. Didn't hit enter yet. Wanted to give them the weekend. Let Christopher brag at brunch about trimming the fat. The system would do a hard check Monday 8 a.m. when transaction volume spiked. I spent the weekend doing things I hadn't done in years. Slept past 6 a.m., went to a diner and ate eggs dripping in grease, didn't check email, didn't answer the automated alerts that started pinging my burner phone Sunday noon when the system noticed the license server was unreachable. Sunday night, bourbon bottle half empty, resolve full. Monday 7:55 a.m., CoreTech's offices would be waking up. Warehouse teams in Colorado and Nevada logging in to process weekend orders. Automated procurement bots attempting to order $500,000 worth of raw materials. I hovered my mouse over the revoke button. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was business. A landlord changing locks on tenants who trashed the place and skipped rent. Paragraph 4, I whispered to the empty room and hit enter. Status lights flickered red. Inventory module unlicensed. Vendor API, access denied. Payroll gateway, critical failure. The cascading red text was beautiful, poetry in motion. The silence didn't last long. 8:03 a.m., first alert from the pager system I forgot to unsubscribe from. Critical outage. Error code 402, payment required. I'd repurposed that HTTP status specifically for this moment. 8:15 a.m., unknown number called. Let it go to voicemail. Then again, I imagined the scene. Warehouse scanners failing authentication, trucks backing up at loading docks, customer service lines lighting up. 8:30 a.m., Kevin texted, OMG, everything's down. Dashboard says contact administrator. Christopher literally kicked a server rack. Kicking hardware, universal sign of a man who has no clue how software works. 9 a.m., phone rang showing CoreTech HQ. I put it on speaker, watered my half-dead cactus. Hello? I answered groggily. Will, this is Christopher. Voice an octave higher, strangled by panic. Look, we have a situation. Systems down, all of it. We think it's a logic bomb. Did you leave something running? Don't work there anymore, Christopher. Return my laptop, no access. Don't give me that. Error message says license invalid. What did you do? Oh, the license? Told you Friday. Did you pay the invoice? We're not paying that extortion. It's a contract, Christopher. Since you didn't pay and fired on-site admin, software reverted to default state, off. Turn it back on right now or I'll sue you into the ground. Christopher, I said, voice dropping to that steel tone I use training Navy rookies. You're currently using unauthorized intellectual property. My lawyer's drafting cease and desist. Try to bypass the lock. That's DMCA violation. Federal crime. You look good in orange? Silence. Muffled voices in background. Someone saying liability and she's right. Just fix it, Christopher pleaded, bluster evaporating. We're losing $10,000 a minute. Sounds like a you problem. I'm unemployed, got free time, but don't do charity for companies that fire me. What do you want? Put Stephen Walsh on the phone. He's in a board meeting. Drag him out. In 10 minutes, vendor autopay tries to wire supplier payments. Since encryption keys are locked, it'll fail. Your supply chain dies by lunch. Fumbling, running footsteps, new voice, deep, booming, currently shaking. Will, what the hell's going on? Morning, Stephen. Your CTO evicted the landlord. Now you're locked out. Stephen tried the We're Family card immediately. Last refuge of a scoundrel with falling stock prices. Look, emotions are high, Stephen said, voice dripping fake empathy. Christopher made a mistake. He's young. Come in. We'll discuss a raise. Big one. I was on my porch now, watching my neighbor Paul Jenkins wrestle with his lawnmower. He was winning, unlike Stephen. Don't want a raise, Stephen. Don't want my job back. That bridge evaporated. Then what is this, blackmail? Vendor dispute. You're possessing unpaid-for software. Since you terminated support, I'm exercising license termination rights. 2 options. Migrate to new system. Christopher thinks he can build AI ecosystem. Good luck. Or purchase perpetual license for source code. Fine, we'll buy it. How much? $100,000. I laughed, startling a squirrel. Stephen, you're bleeding 10 grand a minute. You processed $180 million through my code last year. $100K buys a PowerPoint, not your company's engine. How much, Will? $1.8 million. Exactly 1% of revenue my code saved during the pandemic, plus nuisance fee for listening to Christopher call me old-timer. That's insane. That's valuation. Oh, Stephen? Data Vault export initiates in 1 hour. License isn't renewed, system purges customer data for GDPR compliance. Wouldn't want illegal retention on unlicensed systems. You rigged it to delete data? Programmed it compliant. Mostly true. Privacy feature weaponized. I need time. 59 minutes. Sending DocuSign to your personal email. Corporate emails down since authentication runs on, well, you know. Next 45 minutes, Kevin live blogged the apocalypse. Legal screaming at Christopher. Found the contract. General counsel asked if he can read. Stephen throwing staplers at walls. 10:45 a.m., legal called. Amy Foster, sharp but polite. Will, we've reviewed documentation. Paragraph 4 is ironclad. Catch paragraph 6 too? Stephen's ready to sign. Need assurance systems come online immediately. Wire hits my account. I push perpetual license patch. Red lights go green. Banking app refreshed. Pending $1,800,000. Source, CoreTech Industries. It's there, Amy. Unlock it, Will. 2 keystrokes later, Kevin texted, "We're green. Systems booting. People cheering. Exhaustion hit. Adrenaline crash. It was over. I didn't cheer. I felt drained, like someone had pulled the plug on my energy tank. It was over. I'd won, humiliated the tech bro culture that tried to erase me, secured enough money to retire comfortably. But I also knew I was done in this town. Word spreads fast about developers who hold companies hostage. Fine by me. I poured the cheap bourbon down the sink, grabbed my keys for the good liquor store. But first, one last email to Christopher. Subject, transition handoff. Body, keys are under the mat. Try not to burn the house down. P.S. Legacy garbage just cost you $1.8 million. Respect the code next time, old-timer. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Summit Systems' lobby. Their director, Daniel Brooks, built like a walrus in a tie, came out grinning. Will, heard you torched CoreTech and sold them the ashes. Just enforced a contract, Daniel. Strictly business. Summit was CoreTech's biggest competitor, the Coke to their Pepsi. They'd been trying to poach me for years. In Daniel's office, he got straight to the point. We're struggling with vendor compliance. Slow, crashes constantly. Heard CoreTech has miracle code that works. Not miracle, I smiled. Graph theory and efficient caching. And yes, I built it. Can you build it for us? Can't give you that code. Sold it, respect contracts. However, I pulled out a new folder. That code's 8 years old, Java Legacy. I've been sketching new architecture, Rust-based, high concurrency. Wouldn't just match CoreTech's speed, would lap them. Daniel's eyes lit up. Timeline? 6 months. Give me a team and total autonomy. No Christophers, no product evangelists, just coders who know what a pointer is. Price? Consulting fee plus equity. Daniel extended his hand. Welcome to Summit, Will. I walked out with a contract that made the $1.8 million look like a tip. Here's the thing about winning. It's not about destroying the other guy. It's about making sure even when they think they've won, they're still losing. CoreTech technically owned my code now. They paid millions for a Honda Civic. I was about to build them a Ferrari across the street. 6 months later, Summit launched Flowmaster Pro. It destroyed the market. Faster, leaner, didn't crash when you looked at it wrong. CoreTech stock dropped 40% first quarter. They were stuck with legacy system maintained by terrified juniors too scared to change one line for fear of locking up the bank accounts again. I heard through Kevin that Christopher eventually quit, pivoted to crypto evangelism. Perfect fit. Another industry where you sell hot air and disappear before anyone realizes the balloon's empty. As for me, I'm sitting in my newly renovated living room. Replaced the thrift store furniture with stuff that doesn't creak when you sit down. Got a 65-inch TV dedicated exclusively to classic Clint Eastwood movies. I'm not exactly happy. Happiness is for people who don't know how sausages are made. But I'm satisfied. Balanced. My kids called last week, both finishing college debt-free now, thanks to old dad's retirement fund. My daughter's studying computer science. Says she wants to be like her old man. I told her to read the fine print and always own the keys. I still have that manila folder framed above my monitor. Paragraph 4. The paragraph that bought this house. Late nights, I check Summit's system logs, watch commerce flowing through logic gates I designed. Traffic patterns that would make CoreTech weep. Sometimes I think about the women and men like me scattered across corporate America. The invisible architects keeping lights on while the Christophers take credit for the electricity. We built the backbone of the digital world, one line of code at a time. We debugged the future while wearing yesterday's flannel shirts. We're the ones who remember when servers were actual physical boxes you could kick, back when that might actually help. We've seen technologies rise and fall, watched programming languages go from revolutionary to legacy to nostalgic. We've trained 1,000 junior developers, most of whom now make more money than us while building on foundations we laid. But here's what the Christophers don't understand. We didn't just write code. We wrote contracts. We read fine print. We learned from Navy discipline that attention to detail isn't just important, it's survival. While they were disrupting and pivoting and optimizing synergies, we were building systems that actually work. The new generation thinks we're dinosaurs, relics from the Stone Age of computing. They see our gray beards and assume we don't understand cloud architecture or microservices. They think legacy means obsolete. They're wrong. Legacy means tested. Legacy means battle-proven. Legacy means it was working long before their frameworks existed and will still be running after their startups fold. Kevin visited last month. Kids doing well, found a job at a healthcare startup where they actually value experience over buzzwords. He asked if I missed the corporate world, missed the politics, the endless meetings about meetings, Christopher's kale smoothies. I laughed, about as much as I miss military rations. But don't you miss building something that mattered? I gestured at my computer setup, 3 monitors showing Summit's traffic analytics. Kevin, I'm building something that matters right now. Difference is, this time I own the blueprint. That evening I opened a good bottle, 18-year Macallan, not the hardware store bourbon, sat on my porch watching Paul Jenkins finally get his ancient mower running. Took a sip and raised the glass to the Denver skyline, where CoreTech's building stood dark against the mountains. Here's to legacy code, I said to the empty air, and the old-timers who wrote it. Next time some 28-year-old in designer jeans calls you old-timer or dismisses your work as legacy garbage, don't get mad, don't scream, just make sure you own the keys. And if you have to burn their house down, charge them for the matches. Game over. Checkmate.